filling out the FAFSA application, how you do it, what information you need, and if you have any general questions as we're going through, certainly feel free to ask those questions. I'm more than happy to answer them as we go. And as Brittany said, if you have questions that are more personal to your situation, I'm happy to stay after and answer those questions for you too. So we will get started. So the first thing that families ask about or think about is, how much is this going to cost, and what's all included in this cost of attendance, or budget, some schools refer to it as. The cost of attendance is not only the student's tuition and fees, but it also includes room and board costs, tuition, transportation, personal expenses, books, supplies. Those are all included in this cost of attendance. The cost of attendance is not going to be the same for every student. And the reason I say that is just because a school is going to tell you it's going to cost you $30,000 to go there a year. Every student is going to be different based on the choices they take as far as their room and board is concerned, as far as how many credits they're taking. They may not use as much in transportation costs as what a school allocates for. It just depends on each student. So it's very important to not let that sticker shock or that cost of attendance, like, oh my gosh, how am I going to afford this if you can't go here? Don't let that deter you, because there are options, and it's a lot of the choices that your students and family makes. So with that being said, so you see this big cost of attendance budget. How are you going to pay for that? There's family savings plans, the 529 plans, if you are fortunate to have one of those. Scholarships, there's a FAFSA application, which is all what we want to hear about, right? How many people have filled out a FAFSA application before, or have any idea of what it looks like, or terrified of it? Where do we stand with the FAFSA?
Looked at it.
You've looked at it? Okay, well that's progress.
Tried to fill it out.
Okay, see, that's progress. So we have a lot of first-time filler-outers of the FAFSA application. Is that what I'm gathering? Yeah, okay. Sounds good. That kind of gives me a basis on how deep to go into the conversation. So the first thing is, you want to know, how do you apply? Applying is not scary, I promise. There's a couple things you can do ahead of time. The first thing that you want to do is, your student and one of the parents will need to apply for what's called an FAFSA ID. The FAFSA ID is the electronic signature that the parent will use and the student will use to electronically sign the FAFSA application. Back probably 5-6 years ago, they used the FAFSA PIN number. The PIN number is no longer a concept. It's now the self-selected username and password. So you as the student will have to create one for the students here, and one of the parents will have to create one as well. We will talk about completing the FAFSA. If you have special circumstances, we'll talk about those and what you need to do to help resolve those. And if you are aware of a family who is an undocumented family, there is an opportunity for those students to apply for what's called the Minnesota DREAM Act through the state Minnesota Office of Higher Education. There we go. So first off, the FAFSA ID, as I mentioned before, you have to create one. If you have a valid social security number, you need your date of birth, first name, last name, and ask for a lot of general and basic information initially. Once you get in there and get past that point of it, you'll be asked to set up security questions. They'll ask you to put in an email address. They'll ask you to put in a mobile phone number for account recovery. This is definitely important to jot down what email you use and what phone number you use, because every year, you have to use this every year. And if you happen to forget it, it's not the easiest thing to reset if you don't know one of those two items. We have seen students where they use their school-issued email, which runs into a problem because eventually they lose access to that. So if you have a Gmail or a Hotmail or a Yahoo, that's what I recommend to use, because then you always have access to that email. We just had a student in today. I think one of our staff spent over an hour with her trying to get her FAFSA ID reset. All for them to say, well, you're going to have to call back because this is a busy time and discontinued the conversation. So she was very frustrated. So it's not an easy thing to reset at this point in time, which is why I say the mobile phone number and the email are huge to remember which ones you used. Oops. What is it? Here we go. All right, so what do you need to fill out the FAFSA application? Like I said, Social Security number, alien registration number, 2020 taxes, W-2 forms, schedules 1, 2, and 3 for both the student and parent. If the student didn't earn enough to file a tax return, you still need to report income earned for the student just by using the W-2 wages that the student had or posted. Records of untaxed income, so child support paid, child support received, veterans non-education benefits, workers' comp, disability, the amount in the cash savings and checking accounts for both the student and the parent or parents, information about real estate businesses, current investment farms. There's all, don't include your retirement in the investment section. That's a common question I have. When you get to those questions in the FAFSA, if you click on the box, it will indicate to you on the right-hand side what you're to include and what you're to exclude in the investments piece of it. Those are very helpful hints that I'll mention to hang out to or pay attention to. So this is what the FAFSA looks like. How many people knew that the FAFSA opened last Friday? You guys. I forgot to mention that last night when I was talking to another school. I'm like, oh yeah, I should probably tell you that it is open and ready to fill out. It's free. Please make sure we're on the right site. There is a FAFSA.com that's slowly moving away. Don't go to FAFSA.com, it's FAFSA.gov. FAFSA.com will charge you $100 to fill out an application that should be free. So this is what it looks like on the front page. Since you are all new to the process, you're going to click on the Start Here button to get started. Now, before you even get to the FAFSA, before when I talked about creating that FSA ID, do that piece of it first. Because when you create that, you have to wait for clearance from Social Security Administration. So after you create it and submit it, they'll send it to Social Security Administration. And once you receive a confirmation email back, then you know that your identity's been confirmed and you can continue filling out go to filling out the FAFSA application and be able to electronically sign the same day that you started. Yes.
They said when I filled it out 1 to 2 days, is that accurate?
Yep,
Okay,
that is
I haven't gotten it. Yeah.
You haven't gotten it yet?
Sunday.
What does it say, Tuesday? I will say they're fairly quick with that. Now, with FAFSA just opening, there may be a little bit of lag time. So typically it's 1 to 3 days, so yes.
And it said that I needed that verification and also that the student needed verification. So I can't submit it till I get both of those.
Correct. Yep. So wait until you have received email confirmation for both the student and the parent, indicating that they're good to go.
Is that every year that they have to verify you, or just the one time?
Just the one time. Yep.
But you could have done that before October 1st.
Yes.
I didn't.
Yep, and that's okay. But yeah, you only need to do the FSA ID creation once. It'll only allow you to do it once, actually, because it's smart enough that if you enter in your Social Security number and date of birth again, it's going to tell you there's already an account created using that information. Hopefully it's yours, and it's not somebody impersonating you. But if you do receive that message, obviously, and you've never created one, certainly reach out to the Department of Ed for assistance on how to do that. Or how to fix that, I guess. But yes, no, those are great questions. So the FSA ID, again, you only have to create once, I should say. The FAFSA you have to complete every year. Okay, the first year in completing the FAFSA, it seems to take the longest. The renewal FAFSAs, so next October when you start the process, it's going to go a lot quicker for you because a lot of the information will be pre-filled. If you made updates to an address or something like that, that would be the thing that you need to adjust. The other thing that'll change would be the tax year that you're going to use. But yes, no, those are great questions, so thank you for bringing those up. Other questions that you have about this so far? No? Okay. So we'll keep moving on through. This talks about things to be careful of. We see some common issues with the names reported on Social Security cards not matching what's reported on the FAFSA application. Make sure students and parents are using their legal name that's reported on the Social Security card, because everything's tied and it relates, and it causes issues if we don't use the full legal name. Refer to completed tax returns. Prior to, a few years ago, it was always the year before taxes. Well, now it's prior years. So when you fill out FAFSA like we talked before, you're going to be using 2020 tax information versus your 2021 taxes. So that they changed that. That was before President Obama left office. That was one of the big things he pushed for. Is because their thought process is, if we go back 2 years, most families should have their tax returns done, so there shouldn't be a delay in getting their FAFSA applications submitted on time. I can't say, but I know for sure if it's made that much of an impact. We still have students who are submitting in August for classes that start at the end of August, so it just depends on who you talk to and who you ask. But excuse me. The other thing with the FAFSA application is you are able to enter up to 10 school codes. So if you are filling this out right now and you have no idea, you've got it narrowed down to 5 to 7 schools, you can list all of those schools on your application. I do recommend the students that once they've made a decision to go in and take off those other 5 schools that you listed, so that they don't keep contacting you requesting additional information. Because every school that you put on there will contact you if they need more information, and they will send you award letters and that kind of stuff. So the sooner you let them know that you're not attending with them, they appreciate that, trust me. It saves us time and energy. So the next piece here is talking about who's considered a parent. So this table here is showing you, depending on your marital status, this is whose information you would use on the FAFSA application. So I will let you review that. I won't leave it to you. I'll give you a few minutes and then I'll continue. The one where we see the most confusion with is the one, if you're remarried, you have to include that parent and that step-parent. We have a lot of questions that come in of, so my biological parents, do I include both of them, but they're divorced, but mom, happen to say mom is remarried. Well, which parent supports you more than 50%, or you last lived within the last 12 months? You would include that parent with that step-parent. You can't not include the step-parent. That individual has to be included on the application if you're choosing to use parent. Like, for instance, mom. If mom is remarried, you have to include mom and stepdad. That seems to be the biggest one we have hiccups on in our office. When is a student independent? A student is considered independent if they were born before January 1st of 1999. I'd make sure my year right. If they're married, if they're a graduate professional student, if they've been in legal guardianship, if they're in foster care, if they're homeless or at risk of being homeless. These are all scenarios as to where a student can be considered independent. Solely, parents aren't supporting anymore, they're not giving me any money, they're not living under my roof, etc. Those don't deem a student to be considered independent. Now, if there's a breakdown in the family, that's a different story. Those are conversations. I had mentioned we talked about special circumstances. Those are special circumstance situations where you want to reach out to the financial aid office that your student's attending to see what options that you may have to help get the FAFSA completed. And of course I knew I was going to do that. So after you get through all that jazz, the nice part about the FAFSA is it does have skip logic. And what that means is depending on how you answer the questions, it'll weed you through things that you don't need to answer. When I was on the FAFSA on Monday, just playing around on it because they give us test files, so go around and play with and see what's out there for families. It seemed very, very user-friendly this year. I don't know what they've changed. I don't know if it's the fresh look, the new look. Something seemed to make it feel a lot easier to navigate through. So I hope that's encouraging for families. I know it's coming from someone who's been in it for almost 12 years, so it's easy for me to say that, but I feel like it's more friendly than past years. The other thing to keep in mind is I'm going to tell you all this information now, and in the year 24, 25, they're going to change everything, so I don't know what the FAFSA is going to look like in that year. They're telling us that it's supposed to be more talk amongst the government systems, because if our information is already reported to the government, for instance, your taxes, why do we have to fill all that stuff in when they already have it? So they're trying to make it more user-friendly in that sense, but I don't know what that's going to look like come 24, 25. But it's coming, just so you know. So the other feature that the FAFSA has, which was a huge improvement 6 years ago, I want to say, this is called the IRS Data Retrieval Tool, or the DRT tool. This will allow the parent and or student, whoever has filed taxes and is filling this out, to electronically pull all your information that was filed with the IRS back into the FAFSA application. So you don't have to go through and manually enter in and find line, 17 is your adjusted gross income now, line 22 is your taxes paid. All of that information will automatically pull in. It's a really slick feature. So how you access this is, when you get to the tax portion, there will be an option for you to select, if there's two parents on the FAFSA, you're going to want to use the parent who has the FSA ID created. So depending on if you're parent 1 or parent 2, check the box and enter in your FSA ID. That will bring you or take you to the IRS website, which will allow you to enter in this is what you'll see. Your first name, last name, date of birth, and the social security number, will pre-populate for you, so you don't need to enter any of that information. The sections that you want to pay attention to are the street address, the P.O. box, the apartment number, the city, state, and zip code. Those fields are going to be coming directly off of your 2020 tax return. And make sure you are paying attention to case sensitivity too. And if they spell out the word drive on your tax return, make sure you spell it out, because it's very, very case sensitive and it doesn't change, let's put it that way. If you've moved, I always tell families, try using the old address first, and if that doesn't work, try using the new address, because it may pull it on that. It depends on how fast things talk with the Postal Service and the IRS site. If you have trouble with this, they've made huge improvements to allow this to work with families. There are a couple scenarios where families can't use it. For instance, if you are married and file your taxes separately, that option you're not going to be able to use. The data retrieval you're not going to be able to use. Every other tax situation, you should be able to use the data retrieval tool. If you get stuck on it, or if you have trouble, if you know which school your student is going to, you can always contact their financial aid office for assistance, because sometimes it just takes talking through to someone and trying something a little quirky to get it to go through, and it does. So I have parents who call and they're like, okay, well, how come this won't work? And so then we set up a Zoom and we get going, and I'm like, well, try changing this word or putting the P.O. box here or apartment number here, and sure enough it works, and then they're happy, but they're mad because they just wasted some of their time. But it's fine, we don't care. That's what we're there for. So after you've got that all filled in, You'll click submit, and if it works, this is what you will see. You will see all the fields that it's going to pre-populate for you, or fill in for you, I should say. It's not going to give you any numbers, and that's okay. Because you will know as a taxpayer that what you filed on your taxes is I'm assuring you that it's pulling back into the FAFSA correctly. And even once we pull it back in or transfer it back in, you're not going to see numbers. All you're going to see is transferred by IRS, or transferred from IRS, sorry. After you see this, you'll click check the box right here and hit transfer now. That will bring it all back in. And then you're done. How simple was that? You don't seem very encouraged that it was that simple, I promise. I promise, it's simple. So after you get it back in, there are a few more questions that it will ask you about. So if the box says transferred from IRS, it's not going to let you change it. The boxes that you want to pay attention to are the ones that have zeros in them and they have verbiage above them. So there'll be one on combat pay, basically the untaxed income that we talked about at the beginning. Those fields will need to be filled in by you as the parent and as the student. So if there was child support received or paid, if there was disability, if there was veterans non-education benefits, if you had tax-deferred pensions, which come from box 12 of your W-2 form, there are certain codes that you have to enter. I'm drawing a blank on what those codes are off the top of my head. When you click on that box, it will indicate for you what specific letters, because there are some letters that you don't have to include, but there are letters that you do have to include. That's a common one that gets missed by families. So after you filled all that in, so the parent piece will be first, and then if your student worked in 2020 or filed a tax return in 2020, then that piece is next. That's where you'll fill in that information for the student. At the same time, you will also be looking at that, entering in your total balance of your cash savings checking, your investments. Those are 6 remaining questions, I guess, for the student and the parent that have to be completed. And then you're done. You get to the final page, the submission page. It'll give you a summary, and it'll ask you to review all the information, make sure everything's okay and it looks right. I highly encourage you to pay attention to this and not just click through quick. There have been errors that can be caught prior to that. So after you've confirmed everything, it looks good, you'll scroll to the bottom, you'll hit continue, I believe is what it is, and you'll get a disclaimer. You'll have to review the disclaimer, check the box, and hit submit my FAFSA now. This is the point where the student will be able to submit it, because the student will have agreed to the terms and signed. Before you submit, make sure the parent electronically signs and agrees to the terms as well. It will prompt you to do that before you can actually submit it. So, and again, it doesn't matter which parent creates the FSA ID, just has to be one of you to electronically sign it. If you don't want to create the FSA ID, there is an option to print a signature page and mail that into the Department of Education. Those take anywhere from, I will say, 3 to 6 weeks to process. So it's a pretty drug-out process, to say the least. And I've had issues of them not processing them, and we've had to resend a couple different times before they actually do them. So I always encourage families to do the FSA ID just to be done with it. So, any questions on that? All right, we're good? Okay. After you've submitted it, you'll get a confirmation page that says you've successfully submitted your FAFSA. This is what your EFC is, or expected family contribution number is. We'll talk about that. Here's your next steps. What do I do? Here's what your potential aid eligibility is for the federal programs. At this point in time, as far as a financial aid standpoint is concerned, you're done for the time being. What'll happen is FAFSA will process your application. On a typical, mid-year, it's about 3 to 5 days that they take to process the applications. After they've processed the application, they will send you an email notification saying your SAR or student aid report is available for review. They will either email it to you or mail it to you or both. Again, make sure you review this information to make sure it looks okay, everything's spelled right. You didn't make a mistake and add an extra 0 in your investment section. We have seen that happen. So just don't put decimal points in there, just whole dollar amounts. We've had to remove a few of those. So it does happen, it's not a big deal. If you do, you're not the only one, trust me. So then after that's been reviewed and processed, your student aid report looks okay, then you're kind of just sitting and waiting. And the reason you're waiting is because after they've processed it, they will then send those applications to the schools. Whether you list one school, whether you list 10 schools, every school will get a copy of that. And at that point in time, it's kind of dependent on the school and their processing, if they're started looking at those applications or if not. I can tell you we have not started looking at them yet, but depending on your school, your private schools, they may start processing those in the next couple weeks. So you would want to watch for communications to come from the multiple financial aid offices that you listed. They may be asking for more information. They may be saying, hey, we got your application, we don't need you to do anything at this time, but watch for future notifications. Every financial aid office is different in how they start processing these. So if you haven't heard something, I know for us, we'll probably start looking at them, I would say probably the first part of December, if not a little sooner. I would give schools till at least the end of the year before you call and ask. Give them some time to get into them. But if you just want for a peace of mind, if you want to call and say, hey, I did my FAFSA application, when can I expect to hear something? That doesn't hurt anything either. Then that way you have a peace of mind knowing, okay, if I haven't heard from them, that's okay. The communication is coming. So don't think it got lost in outer space, I promise. They're there. So when you submit it, it's going to give you that expected family contribution number, which what that number is that gives us as the school a determination of how much financial need you have. So when we talked at the beginning about the cost of attendance, that expected family contribution number, that EFC, tells us as a school how much financial need. Meaning, how much can we award to the family, or the student, in the grant funds, in the subsidized loan program, how much in the institutional funds can we award to them, etc. So that EFC number isn't what you're going to have to pay out of pocket. It's an index number for the schools to use to develop their award offer. So once a school knows how much financial need a student has, first they start out by awarding grants, which is what we call gift aid. So that is aid that doesn't have to be repaid back. There's a few different grant programs that are out there. The first big one is the federal Pell Grant. That one's through the federal government. That's awarded to students who are pursuing their first bachelor's degree or certificate program. This year, the max award is up to $6,495. Thought I had a typo, sorry. There is a limit on the number of semesters that a student can have this. So it's 12 semesters of full-time enrollment. So if you are eligible for the Pell Grant program, you have basically 6 years of full-time, 12 or more credits that you could qualify for this grant. After that point in time, there's no longer eligibility for it, and you'd be relying on other sources to help pay for your education. Okay. The SCOG grant is a Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant. There we go. Again, this one, the student must be eligible for the Pell Grant. This is awarded to the students who have the most need, and that's all determined by your school and how their awarding goes. Excuse me, the award is anywhere ranging from $100 to $4,000 is the max. It's very important to get your FAFSA submitted early. The reason I say that is, like the federal or the SCOG grant, there's only a certain pool of funds that each school gets in this program. So once those funds are used up, they're gone until the next year. So if you thinking that you're like, oh, I'll just wait until December to fill out a FAFSA application, I wouldn't recommend that. I would recommend doing it, the next few weeks, because then that way you are guaranteed first dibs at that smaller pots of money. Okay. The Minnesota State Grant, if you are a Minnesota resident, you are enrolled in at least 3 credits at a college or university. You've submitted your FAFSA application within the first 30 days of the term. You could qualify for this grant program as well. This is a grant through the state of Minnesota specifically. And again, by filling out the FAFSA application, you're automatically applying for that one. This one there is also limits on this one. It is, excuse me, 8 semesters of full-time enrollment is what that one is limited to. So, the TEACH grant, or the Teacher Education Assistance for College and Higher Education, there we go, TEACH grant, is another grant program that's offered through the federal government. This one, not all schools participate in this program. So if you are interested in this, it's specific to students who are willing to teach in high-need fields. So your maths, your science, and teaching in a district that serves low-income students would be the piece of it. So there's a few other requirements and criteria to meet, but that one is out there if you're thinking of going into teaching. That one's a potential option for you. Iraq and Afghanistan service grants, I will be honest and say I have not awarded or dispersed one of these grants, but it is an option for families out there if you are in that category listed below. And then the last one is institutional funds. So if you're going to an institution that has donors, they may have some of those funds that they can award to students. And some of them do look at when you turn in your FAFSA application. So that's another reason to get those completed as soon as you can. Sorry. So that's the grants. Now you move on to scholarships. So this is another way to get free gift money as well. I don't know, do you guys have a resource of scholarships that are out there?
I keep track of all the local area ones, basically southwestern Minnesota area.
Perfect, okay.
And it's saved in a G drive. I share it with the seniors.
Perfect.
I think I shared it probably 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
Pay attention to update scholarships. They'll come in. I send them a lot of emails. Like, here's another one. Here's another one. Here's another one.
Yeah, that's great. Every school is different, so I always ask the counselors because I don't know how everybody handles it. But yeah, that sounds like a great resource. If you have selected an institution, or even in the coming months, once you've selected one, certainly reach out to their financial aid office or their scholarship office. They have scholarships available. You just have to go out and seek them. I don't remember for sure when our application portal opens, but those are out there. Check with parents' employers. That's another place that people forget to check. Community organizations, it sounds like Brittany has that all squared away. But yeah, the other thing that I want to mention with scholarships is be careful with scholarship scams. I don't feel like they're as common now, but if the scholarship site is asking you for credit card information or banking information, steer clear of them. Those are not legit sites. You shouldn't be getting charged to apply for gift money. But yeah, they do take a little time. However, if you can spend, an hour or so writing a one-page paper and you end up with a $1,000 scholarship, I'd say that's probably worth it. But I know they are a lot of work and they're daunting. So if you do start, obviously keep track of everywhere you've applied, every account that you've created, and just kind of give yourself a little leeway almost, because there's a lot out there. But unfortunately, there's a lot of scholarship funds that go unused every year too. So even if you miss the deadline for your current school, they may open up a scholarship portal later too, because they have extra funds because of students who didn't come, or students who dropped out from fall to spring. So there is opportunities. Just pay attention to your school email once you get there too. So did you have?
Yeah, I was going to add with just a scholarship scam, with the condition of never have to pay for anything.
Yep.
I've seen scholarships say due February 30th. February 30th isn't a calendar day, so be aware of that. If the day does not exist, or even September 31st, that's not a day. So be aware of that. I've actually stumbled upon it just looking for scholarships. Yeah, that's not real. I was like, ooh, let's get out of that website. Yeah. But be aware of that and obvious spelling and grammar errors.
Yes.
So,
yes, those are very
those
good
are the
points.
big things. I just want to point those out.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that. Minnesota Dream Act, I'll touch on this briefly. This, like I said before, is an opportunity for students and families who are undocumented to apply for some state aid, specifically through the state of Minnesota, and they would apply through the Minnesota Office of Higher Education, and they notify the schools of how much the student qualifies for, and we award that to the student and disperse it. So if you know somebody, certainly share that information to them. So we talked about grants, we talked about scholarships. Now the work study program. So work study is an opportunity for the student to work on campus, and whether it be the financial aid office, whether it be admissions, whether it be athletics, whether it be maintenance, any of the department on campus that is hiring a work study student, a student can work in. Right now, it depends on where you're located. I've seen work study jobs anywhere from $10 to $12 an hour. It just depends on the institution. It's a part-time flexible job. The wages are paid directly to you as the student, 20 hours a week. The benefits of work study is the fact that you're on campus, you're getting connected, and it's 20 hours a week, which is just enough. And then your supervisors are more flexible because they know that you're a student first and a student worker second. So they're very focused on academics, and it does say work study, so there may be points in time where you are able to study while you're at work, but the main goal is also to get you work experience and get your resume developed and help you proceed into your next step in life, I should say. So there is an opportunity for that to happen. It just depends on which area you're in, because every area has ebbs and flows throughout the year. Obviously, if you're working with maintenance or athletics, I don't know if there's really any downtime in those two areas. So it just depends on what you want to do. And those jobs will be posted on the financial aid site, usually is where they're found. You apply with the supervisor, you interview, you set up your schedule with them. It's just like a normal job, you're just on campus. Typically the hours are between 8 and 4:30. Now if you're working athletics, you may end up having to work weekends depending on sporting events and that kind of stuff, or campus security. Those, depending on your choice, kind of dictates what your schedule would be. I did work study as a student, and I enjoyed it, and I never left higher ed from that point on, so I'm still here. It's a good way to develop relationships and get your network built. So, let me back up to work study, sorry. If your student doesn't qualify for work study funding, there is also what they call student help or student employment. The difference between work study and student employment is where the funds come from the college's side of things. Sometimes there's different departments that have more pools of the student help money, so they can hire more student workers versus the work study. So don't get discouraged if you don't see work study on your award letter or award offer. Always keep asking, is there any student help options available on campus? Because those should be there too. Okay, so now we've talked about all that. Now we're going to talk about the nasty loan word. Nobody likes loans. I get it. I understand. But there's a few different options. In some families, this is the only option to help their student get through their education. So there's a few different loan programs that we'll talk about. The first one is the federal direct loans, and these are the subsidized and unsubsidized. So the subsidized loan, difference between the two, the subsidized loan, the government pays the interest on that while you are attending school. The unsubsidized begins accruing interest the day that we disperse that to you. Right now, for this year, the interest rate is a 3.73 fixed. There is a 6-month grace period. So if you drop below half-time, which is 6 credits or less, or 1 to 5 credits, excuse me, if you withdraw from your classes completely or if you graduate, that's when your 6-month grace period kicks in. So that gives you time to figure out your repayment options, who your loan servicer is, etc. So at the end of, let's see when did that happen. Right now, I think the Department of Education has 13 different loan servicers. That's soon to be 10 by the end of the year. So things will, and I can't even tell you when you guys get there who your servicer will be because it could change. I mean, it's just dependent on who bids back into the process for loan servicing. So those are all, there's no cosigner required on the federal loans. Just by filling out the FAFSA application, you're applying for those. The other federal loan that we'll talk about is what's called a Parent Plus loan. So this loan is taken out in the parent's name on behalf of the student. This one is at a 6 to 8 fixed interest rate. There's no grace period on this one. There's no max on this one. With the student loans, the federal subsidized, non-subsidized, there is annual limits to each of those. So with a freshman level, you're eligible for $5,500 in those programs. Once you hit sophomore level, which is 3259 credits, you are bumped up to $6,500. Once you hit 60 credits plus, then you're up to $7,500 as the annual limit on those loans. The Parent Plus loan, when I say there's no annual limit, because it's up to the parent and student how much that they want to borrow. So after we as an institution have awarded you all the financial aid you can have, you're going to have, let's say your cost of attendance budget is $20,000, and we were able to get for you in federal and state funds $10,000. Well, there's a $10,000 difference where the Parent Plus loan could come into play if you choose to borrow that. Now, you don't have to borrow that, but we can't award you any more than the cost of attendance for the college. So there is a credit check when the parent applies for this, and applying for this loan is all done through studentaid.gov. There is on the top, there's a aid available, I want to say, and it's a drop down, and you click apply for the Parent Plus loan. That's again a place where you need your FAFSA ID, username and password. If the parent is denied the Plus loan, there is an opportunity for the student to receive additional unsubsidized funds. But if the parent is approved, then obviously you go through with the process of accepting that loan. So there is an option with the Plus loan as well. Is if you apply for the Plus loan, you're approved, you can either have the overage go to you as the parent, or you can let the overage money go to the student. So let's say you applied for a $5,000 Plus loan, and the student's remaining bill is $3,000. There's that $2,000 overage. That $2,000, you can either say, no, I don't want my student to have that, or you can say, yeah, that's fine. I don't care if the student has it or not. Quite honestly, I've seen it go both ways. Some parents don't feel comfortable with their students having that much of an overage, so they take it and save it for future semesters. It's honestly dependent on what you choose to do. So kind of along the Parent Plus loan, they have alternative loans, which are loans through a bank or credit union of your choice. Every school has a list of, a historical list of lenders that they've used in the past. You would need to reach out to them specifically to see who those lenders are. Financial aid administrators can't recommend one lender over another because that is against federal regulations. So we always tell families to pay attention to interest rates, grace periods, repayment terms, all that kind of stuff before deciding which loan that they want to pursue. And then that with the alternative loans, those would be in the student's name. Parent would likely need to be a co-signer on that. Along those lines, again, is the Minnesota Self Loan Program. This one is through the Minnesota Office of Higher Education. Again, this would be in the student's name. Parent will need to co-sign. looks like this year is a 4.85 fixed and a 2.1% variable. Depending on, I believe they do require you to make the interest payments as you're going through. I don't know with COVID if they've changed things a little bit or not. Everything's changed with COVID, so I can't remember what's in place and what's not, because there's a lot going on. But always just ask those questions. That's what they're there for. I do know that they're working remotely yet, but they do answer phone calls all day long. So now that you've gotten through that, there are some federal tax benefits for higher ed. When you file your taxes, there is a tuition and fees deduction. There's a student loan interest deduction. Lifetime learning, American Opportunity Tax Credit. All of those are options for tax purposes when you get to that point. I'm not an expert in that, so I'm not going to touch on those anymore. If you need more information, these are all sites that I would recommend. These are all valid sites. These have all been checked, so I feel comfortable going or having you go to these to use as resources. And I can send this I can send the presentation to Brittany so that you can distribute it to families, so you don't have to quick jot everything down. I know Brittany did leave out the basics folder from the from Minnesota Office of Higher Ed that has a lot of good information in it too. I do have some checklists that I can leave for you as well. It kind of gives you a timeline of when to do things. Those are good for any age. I can't remember how early it starts, but 8th grade I want to say. But yeah, those are good resources. Okay. I feel like I flew through everything. Sorry. Does anybody have any questions?